Hi, my name is Lucy Huxley. I'm a whore, and welcome back to my bedroom. I am so excited to be back on the podcast after an extended summer break. A lot has happened, some of which I've shared a bit about on my TikTok. Some of it I can't share about due to client discretion, but I had a lot of fun over the summer. I got to travel quite a bit, had some amazing bookings. Also, over the summer, while I was taking a break from my podcast, it blew up on YouTube, which was a crazy surprise to me. One of the episodes now has over 200,000 views on YouTube, which I never expected to get any numbers like that on YouTube. For me, YouTube was just a place to upload my podcast for people who already followed me, who preferred to listen to it there or preferred to watch it. I never put any effort into my thumbnails or my keywording or my SEO. So it's really been a fantastic surprise to me that so many people are tuning in on YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, I really appreciate it. And please subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, you can also leave me a review or share the podcast with friends if you enjoy it. That really helps me out. A couple other things I want to mention before I dive into this episode. First of all, thank you for your patience if you've been waiting for me to come back after my little summer break. My original plan was to start episodes again in September, but I was dealing with a really difficult back injury for a couple of weeks, so I couldn't even sit up long enough to record the podcast, hence the slight delay. But I'm back into it now. I'm going to be doing regular episodes, but I've decided that going forward, I'm going to be doing an episode every other week instead of once a week. That's just a much more manageable pace for me. I'm doing this podcast 100% myself on top of all of my work as an escort, and also my OnlyFans and my social media. And the podcast on top of that takes me about 8 to 10 hours of work for each episode. I don't make any money from it. So if I do it every other week, it's just going to be more manageable for me in the long run. And then I won't have to take 3 month breaks after every 10 episodes. So yeah, that's the plan, but there will be more consistent episodes again. So today's episode, as you can probably tell from the title, is about how I fell in love this summer and the story of that. And I debated for quite a while if I wanted to share this story or not. And I still don't feel 100% sure that it's the right decision because it feels very vulnerable to me. But I'm mostly sure that it's the right decision to share it. Here we go. I'm just going to start from the beginning. So at the end of March, I was going out with friends. I was out with my best friend and this guy that she was seeing at the time. And we were going to go to a bar. And I was very determined that night. I decided before I went out that my mission for that night was going to be to make out with a cute guy. I almost never go out with that intention. I think maybe 3 or 4 times in my whole life, I have gone out with the intention to make out with a guy or find a guy to go home with. Normally, it's really not my priority. But this night, I was like, I feel like making out with a cute guy. Ideally, I want to find a guy to add to my roster. I was seeing like 1.5 people at the time, and I wanted someone to see more regularly. So I was like, maybe if it works out well, I could go home with him. Maybe even I could see him regularly. But, we're setting our standards low. I just want to find someone to make out with. So me and my friend and this guy she was seeing went to this bar. There was no one at the bar that I was interested in. My friend suggested going to this small underground club after we finished at the bar, and I was like, that sounds great. Let's do that. We went, had a few drinks, we're dancing, having a nice time. Around 2 a.m., my best friend and her guy left, and I still had not completed my mission for the night. So I decided to stay. I was a little bit drunk, and I went to the bar to order myself another drink. And as I was standing in line waiting at the bar, I looked around. I did a little scan around the room to look for cute guys. And I saw this guy standing behind me in line. And I was like, that's him. That's the guy I'm going to make out with tonight. I just thought he was cute. I liked the way he was dressed. I loved his vibe. Seemed to be very sweet. So I saw him, I gave him a look. We had a moment of eye contact, and then I turned back around to the bar. When I finally got up to the front of the bar, he came and stood beside me and he said something to me. I don't remember what it was. We just started making small talk, talking about the club and about dancing. And then we got our drinks and I got mine first. So I said to him, "Oh, I'll see you on the dance floor." And I left and I went back to the dance floor. I still had a couple of friends at the club, so I was dancing with them. And then I noticed that this guy had returned to the dance floor, but he was a little bit further away from me. So I saw him and I danced over to him because I was not going to let my mission go unfinished. And we started dancing together. And it's all a bit blurry. We were both drunk at this point, but we were dancing together. Then he asked at one point if he could touch me. I think he said, "I would really like to touch you while we dance together. Is that okay?" So he like put his arm around my waist and it got very intense very quickly. We had really good physical chemistry and I felt very safe and comfortable with him. After a while, I took a break from dancing. I met his friends that he was there with. We danced some more and started making out, and things got really hot and heavy really quickly. After we had been there together for like an hour, we were like making out in a hallway. I was super turned on, and he said to me, "Do you want to leave the club?" And I was like, "Yes, I would like to." And he was like, "Do you want to come back to my place?" I was like, "Yes, I do." At that point, I already knew that I wanted to have sex with him. The physical chemistry was just so good. I felt so comfortable with him. And this is a very rare thing for me to do. I think it actually is the first time in my life that I have just went and had sex with someone that I met at a club in my personal life. There would be plenty of times where I had met someone at a club and exchanged contact info and made out, or I had hooked up with someone at a club, but I had maybe met them once before. But this was truly like diving straight into it, and it just felt really right for me. So we went back to his place, and I think we had sex for 3 or 4 hours. The physical compatibility and chemistry was just crazy. And we barely spoke. Like, I left his apartment at 7 a.m. and I asked him for his number because I was like, I want to stay in touch with this guy. Maybe we can see each other again. At that point, I didn't remember his name. So I gave him my phone so he could type in his name because I had no recollection of what it was. I had no idea what he did for work because we never even got to that topic. I knew like where he was from and I knew that he had a job and that he had an apartment and a very cute dog. And that was about it because we just didn't really speak about anything else. So the week after that, we met up again. He actually originally texted me because I left my necklace at his apartment and I was like, "Oh yeah, like I'll come by and pick it up in the next few days" because it was a favorite necklace of mine. And he said to me, "Aside from that, I would also really like to see you again if you're up for that." And I was like, "Yeah, I am." So we saw each other again the next week. I just went over to his apartment. It was a very casual hookup. And to give you some like insight into my mindset at this time, I was 100% thinking I am only interested in casual sex right now. Or I don't necessarily like the term casual sex, which if you've listened to some of my previous episodes, you know, because I don't think that sex is ever really casual, but it doesn't need to go along with romantic love or commitment or any of those traditional things that we associate with non-casual sex. But I was like, ideally, I want a friends with benefits, someone that I genuinely enjoy hanging out with, but I have no interest in catching feelings for somebody. I have no interest in being in a romantic relationship. Because about a year ago from now, I came out of a very abusive, very unpleasant relationship. And because of that, I associated being in a relationship with my life being awful. Because I went through this transformation of being in this awful, unhealthy relationship. And then I was single and my life became amazing and I was thriving. And my plan was to be single for 3 or 4 years. That was my definite plan. I was like, I'm not going to let anyone get in the way of this. I want to have a few years of being by myself, of being with my friends, of focusing on my career. And I don't want a man to get in the way of it. I just didn't believe that there was a way a romantic relationship could be worth it. And I think I was also just very scared and scarred from my past relationship. And I viewed relationships as like a life ruining thing because that is what I had just experienced. So, back to hanging out with this guy. It was very, very casual. I would not sleep over at his place. I would not allow him to sleep over at my place. We saw each other once a week. And at first, we were just meeting up at, one of the other's apartment. After a few dates, he suggested like going to a movie. So we did that together. And then we would go to bars together, more proper dates, because we definitely also enjoyed each other's company outside of the bedroom. And we actually started talking. Instead of just being physical, and we started getting to actually know each other. And that continued for a couple of months, but I was still very strict with my rules of like no feelings, no sleepovers. Nothing is going to change that for me. And at the same time, I was continually being impressed by him because he was so sweet and so thoughtful. And whenever I was with him, I always felt so taken care of emotionally and physically. It always just felt so nice to be around him. And I could definitely tell that he had a crush on me, but I had been very direct and forward about my intentions to keep things casual and not have any romantic involvement. And he was totally chill with that. He said he agreed with that. And he never expected anything more from me than what I was willing to give. And also at this point, I would have kicked him to the curb if he had done anything wrong. If there had been one red flag, if he had done something or said something to me that I didn't like, I would have kicked him out of my life. I had a zero tolerance policy for any type of bullshit. And he just never did anything that I didn't like. So things continued to get deeper. And after maybe 2.5 months of seeing him, I realized to my absolute horror that I had feelings for him. And I remember I was out with my best friend, who I'd been out with when I met this guy. And her and I were like getting dinner at a movie. And while we were at dinner, I realized that I kept on wanting to talk about this guy. Like, when you have a crush on someone new and you like all you want to do is tell your friends all about this person because you're so excited. I realized that I wanted to do that. And I was actually stopping myself from talking about him because I was like, no, I don't want to. I don't want to be that girl. I don't want to be talking about some guy. I don't want to have feelings for anybody. And then at the end of the night, when me and my friend parted ways, I like told her, I was like, I have feelings for him. And I said it with this look of horror on my face. And she was like, well, that's amazing because she had obviously only heard me saying good things about him because that's all I had to say about him. And I was like, no, it's not amazing. It's terrifying. One of the reasons it terrified me so much was because of my work, because of past experiences that I've had. I just didn't believe that my work and being in a romantic relationship was compatible, that it was possible at all. So this guy, he knew what I did for work. He asked me on the first night, what do you do for work? I told him I'm a sex worker. We talked about it more on the second date. Like he was curious. I told him like, oh, I'm an escort. This is what I do. He was always super chill about it. Never asked me any weird questions. It was just like a non issue for him, which was obviously a green flag. if you've listened to my podcast, you know that in the past, I think this was in 2020, I developed feelings for a guy. I went and did a porn shoot, and I realized on that porn shoot that the only person I wanted to have sex with was this guy I had feelings for. And that was a big shift for me because previously I had always been in non-monogamous relationships. So when I went through that experience, I was like, I think I'm a monogamous person now. And I don't think that doing any form of sex work that involves having sex with other people, whether that's porn or escorting, is going to be compatible with a relationship for me, just for me personally. I know these things are different for everybody. So that's kind of how I viewed things since that experience in 2020. Things didn't end up working out with that guy, but I was monogamous with my most recent ex for a couple of years. And I just came to believe that if I was in love with someone and wanted to be in a relationship with them, that I wouldn't want to have sex with anybody else to the point where it would upset me. So when I realized I was getting feelings for this guy, I became absolutely terrified because to me, it meant that eventually I was going to reach a point where I was going to have to choose between him and my work. And I told myself I would always choose my work. Like, there is no way in hell that right now, after everything I have been through with men, I am going to give up my work, my income, my career for a man. And of course, now that I was developing feelings for him, I didn't want to have to lose him. But I also didn't understand how things would be able to go any other way. So I was really terrified. I was actually just so anxious about it for about a week. And eventually I talked to some random girl in a bar about it. I was talking to all my friends about it, trying to get advice. And eventually this random girl in a bar gave me the best advice. She was just like, you have these feelings, right? And it would be unnatural for you to try and suppress them. And she said to me, you seem like the type of person who doesn't want to live their life out of fear. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I never want to act out of fear. And she was like, then just let go of the fear and, and see where it goes. So that's what I did. I was able to not focus so much on my fears. I did still have some fears about where things were going, but I was able to relax more into it. I told him that I was getting feelings for him and that it was scary for me also. And he told me that he was getting feelings for me also. We started seeing each other twice a week. I started letting him sleep over and things progressed from there. I was feeling pretty good about it. And then a few weeks later, this would have been like the beginning of June, I think, my biggest fear happened. I had a booking with a client. It was a 2-hour booking. It was very nice. It went very well. It was a very sweet client. He was very respectful. And after the booking was over, I cried and I cried because I had had such an unpleasant time in the booking because I realized that the only person I wanted to have sex with was this guy I was seeing. And I just felt so sad about having sex with someone else when the only person I wanted to be with was him. So I was terrified. It was my worst fear coming true, where now I would have to choose between my career and this guy that I was starting to fall in love with. And me and this guy went to yoga together that night. And I always find yoga classes to be quite helpful for me in processing emotions. And during the yoga class, I realized that if the universe is presenting me with the opportunity to love someone and to have this amazing man in my life, who am I to say no to that? Like, who am I to decide that I should not welcome love into my life and the potential for this amazing relationship. And I decided that I wanted to try to have it all. I wanted to try to find a way to do my work and enjoy it and also be able to be with this guy. Because of course I could force myself to do my work and hate it and cry after every booking, but I do my work because I enjoy it. I love escorting. And if I were to cry after every booking, I wouldn't enjoy it anymore. And I have a hard time forcing myself to do things that I genuinely hate. So it would ruin my work in that way. So I made the decision to try and find out a way to have it all. After yoga class, we went back to my place together and I told him about how I had felt that day on my booking. And I told him about my feelings. And he said that he was really sad that I had felt sad, but that he was also happy that I had those feelings for him because he had that level of feelings for me also. And that's also when we had our first proper discussion about my work because, like I said, he had always been very chill about it, but we had never had a real conversation about my work and how he felt about it and how it would relate to our relationship. So I asked him about it, and he told me that when he first met me and we first started seeing each other, he wasn't sure how to feel about it. But that as he got to know me, he understood that it was something that was really important to me and it was something that made me really happy. And so it was a part of me, and that he would never want to change that because he would never want to change me. And hearing that, even just when I say that, it makes me emotional because my last boyfriend made me feel so ashamed for what was then my past in sex work and was really unaccepting of that part of me. So for this man to be in front of me now being like, I see that it's a part of you and it's a part of you that I accept was amazing to me. And yeah, it was a really beautiful night that night. I remember thinking like, I feel like we're gonna be in a relationship and I feel like I'm in love with him, but it felt like way too much for me to vocalize that out loud that night. Like confessing my feelings and all that had already been so much, but we could both tell it was definitely going in the direction of a relationship and love. After this, I was going traveling and I would have a few bookings. And then him and I were going to go on a trip to Greece together. We had planned it a few weeks prior to this. So we didn't see each other for a bit over a week. Maybe it was 2 weeks. And my first booking that I had after this conversation with him, I was nervous for because I was scared I was going to cry after it again and it was going to make me feel like shit because I just wanted to be with my man. And to my great surprise, I felt totally fine after the booking. And I realized that what had made me feel so upset about having sex with someone else was simply the lack of security in my relationship with this guy. It was the fact that my feelings were so intense and I didn't know if they would be reciprocated. And I didn't have any commitment or reassurance from him that he was going to be there to catch me when I was falling for him. And so once we had that conversation, and once we realized that we were both on the same page and that we both really wanted to be with each other, I felt totally fine and totally happy to go do my work and have sex with other people as part of my work. So that was an extremely celebratory moment for me because I was like, oh my God, I can have my cake and eat it too. I can be in a relationship with this amazing man, and I can also do the work that I want to do. I don't have to sacrifice anything. Because one other thought I had during this process is, why should I have to sacrifice anything? I should be able to have everything I want. I shouldn't have to settle for less. So I shared that with him. It was great news. And then we went on our little trip to Greece together, and he picked me up at the airport. He had gotten a rental car that was red to match my nails because I always have my nails done red. When he brought me to the car, there was like a red rose waiting in the passenger seat. It was so sweet. We had, I think, 4 nights together in total there. So I arrived in the evening on the first day. And I remember even on that first night, I wanted to tell him that I loved him. But I thought that maybe he had plans to tell me later on in the trip. So I made myself wait. And the next day, he took me to this really beautiful beach. He had arrived to Greece before me. So he had planned some things out. And he knows that I'm really into astrology. And I told him that it was going to be a full moon the second night that we were together in Greece. So he had downloaded an app that enables you to track the planets in the night sky so that he could see which beach was going to be the best beach to see the full moon from. So we drove to the beach that day. We had an amazing day lying on the beach. He had gotten a big sun umbrella for me because I do not do well in the sun. If you've seen the color of my skin, which is incredibly pale, I'm not a suntan type of person. I stay in the shade. I put on SPF 50 and I stay in the shade. So he brought this big umbrella for me, set it up, and we just spent all day lying on the beach. And then we went for dinner. And then in the evening, we went back out to the beach to be underneath the full moon. It was a full moon in Capricorn. It was very low in the sky, very close to the earth, and there was almost no one else on the beach. So we sat there and we were making out, and there underneath the full moon, like in one of the most beautiful places I've been in my life, I told him that I loved him, and he said it back. And we had sex there on the beach underneath the full moon. And it was the most romantic, spiritual, magical night of my life. I felt like we were two gods who had come down to earth to experience this night together. I felt so connected to him and connected to myself and connected to the divine at the same time. And it was just so magical and romantic. I don't know how else to describe it. And yeah, the rest of the trip was just a beautiful whirlwind of being in love and having amazing sex. And he took me to a different beach every day. And he really just was doing everything to create and plan this beautiful trip for us. One of the things that I really love about him is that he always makes me feel so taken care of. And I think, especially on social media, when we talk about a man taking care of a woman in a relationship, we mostly are talking about the financial aspect, right? With the whole sprinkle sprinkle movement and all that stuff, which I definitely agree with to a certain point. But one thing I realized in being with him is that being taken care of financially is a very small part of being taken care of. You know, you can be dating a man who has a lot of money, who just throws money at you and buys you expensive things, but doesn't truly take care of you. And this man that I am with now, I feel taken care of every moment that I am with him. He's always so thoughtful on how he can make me happy, on how he can make me comfortable, on what he can do for me. If I come to him with a problem, he listens to me and then he's willing to do anything he can do to help me solve it, to help make my life easier. Like, if I asked him to hang the moon for me because it was really important to me, and it would make me really happy if he did it, he would do it for me. And I don't think I've ever felt taken care of in this way because he takes care of me in this way without expecting something in return. I've been taken care of in relationships before, but it always ends up coming with expectations. And this man never expects anything of me. And this combination of taking care of me emotionally and physically and in any way that he is able to, along with not expecting anything out of me, makes me feel so safe. And it is just so amazing to experience a love like that. And I am so thankful to experience it. And I hope that every woman gets to experience that type of love in their lifetime because it's really special. And he is really special. And there have been difficulties when it comes to my work. It hasn't always been the easiest for him. The fact that I'm sleeping with other people all the time as my job, but he has always taken full ownership of his emotions around it. And he has always been so supportive of me and always wanting me to be successful and not wanting me to feel guilty because I have struggled with that because of my past relationships. Like, if he feels upset, then I feel bad or feel like I've done something wrong. But that's just my own baggage from my past relationships because he always does his best to make sure I don't feel that way. And he reassures me that I'm doing nothing wrong. And we work on things together. And I know something a lot of people are going to be wondering is if our relationship is monogamous or not. At the moment, we're figuring it out. I would say we're like a little bit not monogamous, but because it's quite a fresh relationship, we've only been official for like 2.5, 3 months. We're still figuring out exactly how we want to be non monogamous. I know that there are a lot of sex workers who have monogamous relationships with their partners because the sex that they have for work is work and it does not interrupt or change the monogamy of their relationship. One example I can think of is Dace, who goes by the Modern Working Girl on TikTok. She works in a ranch in Nevada and shares a lot about her experiences. And she has a husband and they're in a monogamous relationship. And she is a sex worker and she sleeps with men for a living, but that's her work and it doesn't define her relationship. But yeah, me and him are slightly non-monogamous at this point, but it feels very fluid and we're always having open discussions about it. And our priority is always each other. Another big thing for me about this relationship is that I actually feel like it helps me be better at my job because this job can be very emotionally draining. I love my job. I truly love it, but it can be very stressful. I also put a lot of pressure on myself to be successful, which I've always done in the various freelance jobs that I have. I'm very good at telling myself I need to reach arbitrary goals, otherwise, I'm a failure. So it can be very emotionally stressful. And he relaxes me and grounds me like nothing else. I just got back from a week-long work trip and I was feeling so distressed and stressed out and like a failure when I returned. And him and I spent one evening together and I felt just fine and great again because he makes me feel so grounded and he's so supportive of me and he just melts my stress away. And that enables me to be better at my job because then I feel fresh and confident and relaxed again. And of course, that would make anybody better at their job, but especially a job like mine that involves so much people skills and so much intimacy. Those little things about how I feel really make a difference. And really, aside from that, I don't feel like our relationship has changed the way I approach my work at all. Of course, sex with people that I have bookings with feels different than sex I have with him. But in the same way that sex I have in bookings has always felt different than the sex I have in my personal life. Because when I'm with a client, I'm providing a service. My goal when I'm with a client, I'm always thinking about what I can do for them. How can I make this experience the best it can be for them? How can I make it memorable? How can I provide them what I want within my own boundaries, of course? But when I'm with my boyfriend, I'm just completely in the moment. I'm able to completely be myself. I'm able to completely show all parts of myself. I can cry, I can scream, I can do whatever I want. And he is there for all of that because he accepts me and loves me for all of me. One of the reasons I did debate sharing about our relationship or not was because I wasn't sure if maybe clients would be less interested in booking with me if they know I have a boyfriend, or if clients would start to ask invasive questions about my relationship when we do meet, or if they would feel like they had to compete with my boyfriend in some way. And I do still have fears about that, but we'll see if that happens or not. I will report back about that. And another amazing thing about my boyfriend, like I remember when I was considering about if I was going to speak publicly about him, about falling in love and having a boyfriend on my podcast and about social media. And I asked him, I was like, how do you feel about it? Do you feel one way or the other? Like, do you want me to speak about it? Do you not want me to speak about it? Because I think a lot of people who are in a relationship with someone who has like somewhat of a public presence, like I do, would feel one way or the other about it. Maybe they would want me to be public about it because they would want people to know that I have a boyfriend. Or maybe they wouldn't want me to be public about it because they wouldn't want our relationship to be open to the public. I receive a lot of hate comments on TikTok. I'm receiving hate comments about myself is one thing, but receiving hate comments about my relationship with someone else is another thing. I would never want to subject that to someone else without their consent. So when I asked him about it, I was like, what do you prefer? He was like, I don't care. I want you to talk about whatever you want to talk about. And yeah, that's just another example to me of how grounding and supportive he is to me. He just wants me to do what's best for me and what I want to do. And he is happy to be there for me. And it's just really special. And I'm really thankful for it. And I'm thankful that I get to be there for him as well. And I am going to touch on astrology for a moment because my astrologer fully predicted this relationship. I'm going to explain this to you guys. I had a reading with my astrologer a few days after I met my boyfriend, who at the time was just some guy I had hooked up with at a bar. Her and I had our meeting, and she said, right now you're going through like your north node, south node transit, which if you don't know anything about astrology, that's fine. You don't need to understand what that means to understand the story. But she basically said this past weekend was the eclipse in Aries Libra. And whatever happened to you this past weekend is going to be a preview of how the rest of this transit is going to play out for you. And in this transit, I see a relationship coming into your life. So she asked me, like, what happened last weekend? And I was like, oh, I just had fun. I didn't say anything else because I didn't think anything significant was going to come out of it. When she told me I see a relationship coming for you, I was like, okay, she's wrong about that because there's no fucking way I'm getting into a relationship this year at all. But she mentioned that the eclipse would be a preview for this transit. And the day of the eclipse is the day that I met my boyfriend. And he is a Capricorn rising. And we said, I love you to each other for the first time under the Capricorn full moon. And the Libra eclipse, which was a bit of a closure on this chapter, it was a closure on the big transit that started with the previous eclipse. The day that we met was 2 days ago, and we had a fantastic night together that really deepened our relationship 2 days ago. Like the whole thing has basically just played out exactly how my astrologer told me it would, which is crazy to me. I've always believed in astrology, but this has really taken it to a new level because I never believed that I would get into a relationship this year, but my astrologer knew and she was right. So I think I'm going to end the episode there. I hope that I've said everything I wanted to say because I didn't write notes for this episode. I just wanted to speak from the heart. And yeah, I would love to know what you think about this episode because I feel like it was a bit different than my previous episodes. It definitely felt more vulnerable to me. My next episode is going to be a Q&A. I'm going to answer all of the most frequently asked questions that I get on my podcast and on social media because there's a lot of reoccurring ones and I want to give you guys all the juicy details that you were asking for. And I'm also going to put up a new question box on my Instagram. So if there's anything you want to ask me, make sure you're following me on Instagram at Lucy Huxley X, and I will put up on my stories at some point, probably like a week from now, question box where you can ask me anything, and I'm going to answer a bunch of questions in the next episode. My name is Lucy Huxley. I'm a whore. Thank you for joining me in my bedroom, and see you next time.